U.S. Modernist Radio is part of DesignNetwork.org, exclusive architecture and design podcasts reaching creative listeners worldwide.
Hello, I'm Emily Ain, daughter of the architect Gregory Ain. I'm listening to U.S. Modernist Radio, and I hope you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio. Great show.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Oh, how the times have changed for the newspaper world. From 2008 to 2020, about 2/3 of newsroom jobs went away. Then the pandemic hit, and more than 90 local papers shut down or had their staffing slashed. Even big papers like the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and the New York Times are smaller and more focused, with digital and video media adding to, but more often replacing, coverage of cultural topics like architecture and design. While the big papers still cover stories like glamorous supertall buildings and the lawsuits when the pipes break, there's one newspaper burrowed away in the heart of New York City that continues to put out some of the best, most detailed, most comprehensive architecture coverage. Joining us today is Diana Darling, founder and publisher of the Architects newspaper, and its newish editor-in-chief, Aaron Seward. Later on, architecture commentary from our special Gen Z correspondent, Louisa Whitmore, and we'll hear some music from Kate Earl, also known as Earl. And now, representing the tail end of the baby boomers, it's Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. Eventually, we all turn into some version of our parents. But there's hope. Have you seen those Dr. Rick ads for Progressive Insurance?
Yeah.
Sure you have. The self-help coach Dr. Rick tries to keep people from becoming their parents. Just type Dr. Rick Progressive and you'll see the videos on YouTube. Even someone in their 30s will recognize some of the habits that older people do, bless their hearts, like printing paper tickets or a flight, or pronouncing quinoa like quinoa, or texting in paragraphs instead of short bursts, or sending pickle emojis because they're talking about pickles.
No.
Or referring to every guy in their 20s as dude or every child as chief. Then there's a man in one of the videos who confesses he tells strangers unsolicited, defense wins championships, to which the woman seated next to him replies, well, it does. My wife and I use these commercials as our own behavioral modification program. We can't stop getting older, but we can certainly be less annoying. Now, if I could only get my grandchildren to actually use their iPhone for voice calls, life would be complete. But that ain't going to happen until they are parents. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In a story that we are largely making up, modernist realtor Angela Roll worked her way through college, dancing like no one's watching to Mambo No. 5 and brilliantly house-flipping Neutra houses, sometimes simultaneously. At the age of 22, following a celeb-filled party at a famous hillside LA modernist home involving diving off the roof into the pool, Absolutely Mall, and a new use for WD-40, Angela was recruited to architecture school, where she spent years in sleep-deprived design studios. Now, she's a modernist real estate agent with specialized design training, advising buyers and sellers on everything, from appropriate renovation to staging a martini party for 200 from 2,800 miles away. That last sentence is 100% true. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or call 919-995-0550.
Thanks, Tom. Diana Darling grew up in Grand Prairie, Texas, also the home of Selena Gomez, and she earned a degree in textiles from the University of Texas at Austin. Over the next 20 years, she worked in catalog marketing, production, and distribution for companies such as Bloomingdale's, The Limited, and Neiman Marcus. With husband Bill Minking, who passed away in 2020, Diana founded the Architects newspaper in 2002, where she continues to run finance, sales, and marketing, and leads the annual Facades Plus conference. She's a board member of both Open House New York, led by Pamela Pachalski, and Culture Now, led by Abby Suckle. Diana has won the National AIA Honors for Collaborative and Professional Achievement, their highest award for a non-architect.
Aaron Seward was born in Corpus Christi, also the hometown of Farrah Fawcett, and graduated with a degree in literature, writing, and the arts from the New School in New York. He's a man with a plan, making a career producing architectural publications, first as a book editor at Edizione Press, then as executive director at the Architect's newspaper, as editor of Texas Architect, and now back on the Gotham City Ranch as editor-in-chief at the Architect's newspaper. We thank Aaron for getting the U.S. Modernist Library over 50 years of Texas Architect for our archives. And here's George's conversation with Diana and Aaron.
Hey, Aaron and Diana, thanks so much for coming on the show today, because I've been wanting to talk with the two of you for quite some time. The Architect's newspaper is one of my favorite publications, not only because it's so informative about what is going on, but it does it in a way that I think that the average person can understand. It's not full of jargon. That's great.
Thanks, George.
Thank you, George.
The accessibility of the paper, that was very much built into its DNA from the very early days. Our founding editor, Bill Minking, was very keen on this being something that could be accessed not just by the profession and informative to the profession, but also convey the kind of excitement of architecture to a more general audience. And its packaging as a tabloid also kind of breaks down the kind of hierarchy that the kind of a lot of the glossier magazines might try to impose on the subject matter of architecture. It kind of makes it less intimidating to pick up the publication and begin to dive in and see what all the fuss is about.
Well, Diana, tell our audience about Bill. I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times a few years ago through Iva Kravitz, and we had some delightful lunches and one sort of hilarious encounter at the Glass House in Connecticut, where I succeeded in embarrassing myself in front of Barry Bergdahl. Tell our folks about Bill.
Well, I met Bill in like 1989, 1990. I was not in an architecture background. And Bill was one of those people where his profession and his personal life didn't separate. They were the same thing, all about architecture. He was a professor at Pratt. He started that position when I met him in 1990, and that was kind of his first full-time job. I think he was 40. And he loved the profession. He had a football scholarship to go to the Catholic college in California. And the summer before he was supposed to go, he went to Italy with some of his buddies. He's from Stockton, California, and fell in love with Italy and architecture. And he came back. He'd bought a suit to go to school, and he ditched the suit. He enrolled in Berkeley, ended up in Berkeley, and became a hippie. But he was going to be on a football scholarship to go to college. And then that summer just completely changed his life. And he was just very curious person about all kinds of things. Bill loved cars. He loved art. He loved collecting. He had a great sense of humor. He found a lot of things very funny. I'm sorry, I'm going to get choked up. And that's who he was. But Bill and I met, and I have a business background, and I love numbers, and the combination of my running a business and Bill's, knowledge of architecture and sort of media, we put those two things together to start the Architect's newspaper.
And he went to every Venice Biennale since it started, right?
I don't know. I don't know because he wasn't going in 1990. I don't know when it started. I'm sorry.
I read in his obituary that Matt Shaw wrote that he had been to every Venice Biennale that they had offered, or just about every one of them.
Probably just about everyone, yeah.
Which is quite an astonishing record of travel for one's pursuit.
Well, Bill was always traveling.
Bill was always traveling, and if you ever were in Venice with Bill, it seemed that he knew everyone there. So he might as well have been at all of them if it wasn't, in fact, every single one.
Exactly.
What led to the creation of the Architect's newspaper, Diana?
Well, Bill was writing for building design under Paul Finch when Paul Finch was the editor. And he was writing a column called like Voice from America. He would write this monthly column. And Paul was kind of a mentor. Bill and I were living in London. I was working for The Gap. We lived in London for 2 years. And Paul kept saying, you should open something in the United States like building design, but you need to do it on a regional basis because you can't cover news across the United States with one publication. When we finished my gig in London, we came back and I didn't really want to go back into retail marketing. And we were like, well, we have a little bit of severance. Why don't we just try it? And so we started putting it together and hired some consultants that helped us formulate a design and connect us with writers. And then Bill was friends with like the Architectural League and all these different nonprofits that helped give us a database to start mailing. And I didn't know anything about selling advertising. I took like a little continuing education course at NYU on selling advertising. And I put together a competitive set and looked at and just figured out how to put together a media kit and get it off the ground. And we just kind of threw it out there in November of 2003.
Now, Aaron, you're the editor of Architect's Newspaper, but this isn't your first go around at the organization. How did you first come into it?
Yeah, that's right, George. I started with the paper in 2005, which was a little over a year since it was started. It started in 2003. And my initial position there was actually a contract position to edit another publication that they were doing on a custom basis for the Steel Institute of New York called Metals in Construction. I had come out of working in architectural books for a small press called Edizioni. So I knew how to put together a publication based upon that background. But entering the paper, I found a much different culture in place. And as I worked on metals and construction, I started to write articles for the paper as well and started to assist with the editorial production of that publication and got to know Bill and Diana very intimately because in those days, the paper was operated out of their loft apartment in Tribeca.
So small operation.
It was very much a shoestring family business. And in those early days, it very much felt like that. We had lunches together in the kitchen. There was a little puppy dog around. Their daughter, Hallie, was quite young and always in and out of the office, stealing the scissors off your desk. And it was just a lot of fun. And from my position as a contract employee, I looked with a lot of longing on the full-time editors because what they got to do was just utterly fascinating and fun. So from that contract position, I was able to get hired on as first an assistant editor and then up to associate. And I stayed with the paper for 10 years before leaving to edit Texas Architect magazine.
Is that long? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a decade. And I worked my way up to executive editor in that time and saw the paper grow up. And we started, as Diana spoke about, the regionality of the paper. And it started as very much a sort of New York City insider's journal. I mean, the idea was that you would get the paper, again, it's the tabloid format. You'd read it on the train, leave it on the seat, and move on with your life, having learned something about, the inner workings, the machinations of the local scene, which at that time, and this is just post 9/11, the New York architectural scene was just exploding with excitement and energy. Of course, all of the proposals for what to do with Ground Zero brought so much the attention of the general public to architecture itself, and also brought a lot of international firms to New York to come up with proposals for that project, but also just to work in what was becoming the global lodestone of architectural design. And New York City itself had this kind of resurgence of importance in terms of architectural discourse, and it kind of attained the heights in a way that it hadn't since the early 20th century. So it was a very exciting time to be in New York and working for a publication that was breaking new ground, reporting on the nitty gritty, on what's happening on the inside, all real reporting. We also had a gossip columnist and a gossip column, which we still have to this day. And it was like the probably most popular part of the Eavesdrop. Everyone wanted to know what sort of shoes people were wearing or who made a faux pas at a party. And as the paper has grown and we've taken our scope of coverage to include the nation and even the world, it's a challenge to try to hold on to some of those early characteristics that made the paper so exciting. But at the same time, it's, the way things work in this world is that if you're not growing, you're dying. So we try to balance that.
Now, Diana, is it just me, or are other people also really crazy about the fonts you use on this paper? It just looks really sharp.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, we had a redesign. Ian is our designer now. He's been with us 2 or 3 years, and went through a redesign with an outside firm, and we did change the fonts. I know the fonts that we originally designed with were very, very popular, and a lot of people started using them, on their own publications. But I don't know that we're still using any of those fonts. You may know better than me, Aaron. I had gotten so far away from production because the business has so many different octopus arms now. I really run the business from a much higher level and don't get into some of those nitty gritties. I get into enough nitty gritty, but not all of those. I don't know. Aaron, do you know the answer to that question?
I don't know the names of the fonts. That's very, very much not my area of expertise. However, I do know that the popularity of the design of the magazine itself. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we should say two names. One was the original art director of the paper. His name was Martin Perrin, and he laid out a wonderful framework for us that worked for over a decade. But all publications have to, again, refresh to stay current. And the current redesign we have, I think, it works very well for us. It carries the DNA of the original publication, but it looks refreshed for this decade.
Well, one of the things that is great about reading the newspaper with that font, past and present, is that it gives it sort of a very new futuristic spin. I mean, if you're just reading Times Roman, and I know we're getting wonky with the fonts here, but, architecture is a lot about the future and about the optimism of what's coming tomorrow. And your publication really gets that message across very subtly by how it's laid out.
Yeah, that's very much built into the design of the publication itself. And it does, I love hearing that, George. And I think that should be the goal of architecture and architectural publications in general, is to give that feeling of the future because the architecture is about the future in its most fundamental way, because these things all start in the past, but they carry us into the future, and building projects have to last a long time. That's what makes them, good, right? Like, it's going to last. It's going to be a cultural artifact. It's going to mean something for a community. It's going to have stability, commodity, and delight, just as Vitruvius said so long ago. But like that breath of the future.
Yes, Vitruvius. Didn't he do an album with Taylor Swift recently?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of never gets old. It's a classic. Well, I mean, I will be the first to say this, but architecture is about the future. It's also about the past. That's what makes it kind of one of our most fascinating cultural productions, is that it seems to have to be everything all at once.
Now, Diana, originally the newspaper was really about New York or centered around New York, and then you started some regional publications. Are they still around?
Well, kind of, in a different way. In 2016, we turned the newspaper, because we were doing 48 print editions, and it was killing us. It was killing the editors. It was killing, advertising sales, trying to sell that many papers. And we were putting stories on the web, and it was just too much. So we consolidated everything into one publication, the Architect's Newspaper, and we started regional newsletters. So we have a newsletter that goes out every afternoon at 3:00 in regions. So that's kind of how we talk about regionalism now. Okay. So no, we don't. We do a lot of things now that we start out as a newspaper. Now we have multiple websites. We have events. We have
a lot of events. Yeah.
Facades, Tech Plus, preservation event, a timber event. We do a lot of Zoom calls, Zoom events, virtual events, webinars. We have multiple social media platforms. And we have another publication called A&N Interior, which is about projects designed by interior architects. And we have something new that we're working on.
Can you tell us?
It's a puzzle project It's called Puzzle Project, and we are going to launch that in the next couple of months. And it's going to be images by architects. So the first round, it's called Iconic Drawings, and it's an image from Archigram, one from Libeskind, one from Thomas Whitcomb, and one from Arakawa plus Gens.
Okay. And where will these appear? Will they be printed or on the web?
No, they're puzzles. It's a puzzle company.
It's actually puzzles.
Yes, we're starting a puzzle company.
I thought that was a code word for something.
No, it's called Puzzle Project. And it will be on Shopify. We're creating a Shopify. We're going into retail, which is kind of where I came from. I'm very excited about this. And we hope to launch 3 series in the next year. And it's fun. We're just getting this all underway now.
So it's kind of like Lego did with the famous buildings.
Yeah.
You could buy the Farnsworth house in Lego. You'll be able to get different things from you in puzzles.
Exactly.
Now, that's pretty cool.
That is our next project on top of everything else that we do.
And I think the takeaway from that, George, is not going to shock or surprise anyone. It's really hard to make money in publishing.
Really? It's hard to make money in publishing. I hadn't heard that.
It's true. Trust me.
He's letting the cat out of the bag. I heard this saying, and I think it was somebody when they were starting Politico, which just recently sold for billions of dollars. In publishing, you have to learn how to stack dimes. And that's what we do. We stack dimes from a lot of different sources.
Stacking dimes every day, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the most remarkable things about the paper for me, because I was there for so long in its early days and I left for 6 years and I came back, I've gotten to know a lot of the publishing world, and the paper is very unique because we're so independent. You know, we're not owned by a big corporation. We're not the publication of an association or a nonprofit. You know, we have to feed ourselves and our editors, and for a very small, scrappy publication like us, like breaking into the field, like the fact that Bill and Diana were able to do it at all is like incredible. And what it says to me is that there was a real need for it, because you don't just waltz into the world of publishing. You have to kick the door down, and then you have to scream until people look at you, and then you have to just not go away.
Yeah.
You know, because no one's asking you to stay, you know,
right,
until it flips, and then they do. And now people love the Architect's Newspaper. They can't imagine living without it.
It's like a burglar who gets into your house and just stays long enough to when you invite him to dinner.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I always say that. I think they thought, man, these people are still here. And then all of a sudden you become like the establishment. You're not even, young anymore. You're the establishment. It's been 18 years. Yeah. And you're right, Aaron. It's like, they're not going away. I guess we have something. This must mean something. We have to pay attention.
Well, one of the things that I liked about your regional publications when you did them, and we have them all online that people can see at the U.S. Modernist Library, is that it really gave voice to a number of architects who weren't famous already, who were doing projects in California or Nevada or Utah or in some of the regions that you covered. In some cases, it was kind of the biggest press they'd ever gotten.
Yeah, one time I know that it was a young architect that we were featuring in a story, and they asked Bill, they were like, can you make sure this gets put in the paper and not just online so my mom can see it?
Yeah. It's like being on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Right. Well, I always say, it's almost like the Architect's Newspaper is this child. We've had this child. The child went out in the world and created a name for itself. And it's, I'm so proud of it. It's kind of like a third person. It's not even, you don't even know who it is anymore because they have all these relationships beyond your scope of who you can imagine looks at it.
It grew up. Now, can anybody subscribe to this, or do you need to be an architect? How does that work?
Anyone can subscribe.
Well, it's free to state registered architects, and we don't really make a lot of money off of subscriptions. You know, the whole thing with membership that everyone does in media, we've explored that. We almost thought about, we went through a very deep exploration of that in 2021, and it didn't quite get there. I think we got caught up in just trying to stay in business and keep our conference businesses alive. So we didn't launch it. It's still on the table, but that's, got to be the future. We can't give away all this edit for free, and we got to find ways to bring in dollars so that we can pay Aaron and his team and keep people happy and, offer a living wage. So,
well, if you have a telethon for Aaron, I'd be glad to come and be part of it because,
Yeah, thanks,
more
George.
bucks for Aaron.
I would like to wade in at this point to say that it's very true that creative arts labor in general is underpaid. It barely exists as an industry. To find people like me is very difficult. There aren't that many people because there's no industry to support them. And now that I'm editor-in-chief of this publication and I have a bunch of younger editors underneath me, I feel the pain that they all feel, which is that everyone who's doing this is doing it because they can't do anything else. They love it. They have to be involved in an editorial trade. And the fact that they can't make a very good living at it is heartbreaking to see.
Yeah.
So, it's very much our intention, if we can make money, to pass that on to our staff, because without them, we would be nothing.
Yes, my wife refers to our project here as a 14-year seizure. So, once you get into it, you just can't get out.
You can't get out. Yeah. You do it for other reasons.
The website is archpaper.com. That's ARCHPAPER. You can go to archpaper.com/subscribe and sign up for newsletters or print issues. Thanks so much, Aaron and Diana.
Well, thank you,
George.
This is a lot of fun. And we'll make sure you get some more papers to scan.
And buy a puzzle, George.
That was my conversation with Diana Darling and Aaron Seward. And now a few minutes with TikTok design critic Louisa Whitmore.
I'm Louisa Whitmore, and today I want to talk about a mid-century modern home in Palm Springs that is currently on the market for $4 million, was owned by Frank Sinatra, and hasn't been able to find a buyer for 14 years. This house, well, technically it's 3 houses, is called Villa Maggio after Sinatra's character in From Here to Eternity. Villa Maggio has been on and off the market since 2007, and somehow no one has snapped it up. Unlike Frank Sinatra's other Palm Springs home, Twin Palms, it is made almost entirely of exposed wood. The whole home, all 3 homes, if you count the pool house and guest house as well, is colored in weird earth tones that basically make it blend in completely with the Southern California desert hill it is nestled into. To give you an idea of how much it blends into its surroundings, I'll just say that when I first saw Villa Maggio, I thought it had grass growing on the roof as a stylistic choice. It does not. The house was designed by Ross Patton and completed construction in 1970. It cost $1.9 million to build, which, adjusted for inflation, is about $13.4 million today. The weirdest thing about this house is that, like I mentioned earlier, Frank Sinatra already had a house in Palm Springs, and it was only 20 miles away from this one. He had reached the level of fame where you need 2 houses in one city, so you can have one just to party in. And that's what it was for. It was originally used for Frank Sinatra to entertain or throw massive parties, and he actually helped with a lot of the interior design choices himself, and most of them are still there, filling up the house. And I don't want to imply anything about how that might be connected to why it hasn't sold, so I won't. The home also features tons of amenities such as 2 saunas, 7 fireplaces, a tennis court, a pool, a helipad, and a 26-car parking lot, which makes it so wild that no one will buy this house. In 2014, it was listed for $4.4 million, which is a fraction of the construction costs adjusted for inflation, but no one bought it, so the next year it was put on the market for slightly less at $3.95 million. I think you can guess where this is going. No one bought it then either. Now it's listed for $4.25 million, and it hasn't sold yet. But I have a proposal on how to make it more appealing to potential buyers. Split it up. Make it 3 separate houses, all totally secluded from the city of Palm Springs and society itself, all super close together. And yes, one of the houses would have about 5 more bedrooms than the other ones, but that's fine. You can lean into the super small gated community vibe to appeal to crazy rich families, not, just individual crazy rich people. But, if that doesn't work out, I bet they could make it into a museum. I think people would go to that.
Singer-songwriter Kate Earl, a.k.a. Earl, grew up in Chugiak, Alaska, which is a suburb of Anchorage. From age 4, she's played piano, guitar, written songs, and worked in her parents' gas station. But there's no music industry in Chugiak, so she left for L.A. at 17 and soon got a record deal. Her debut album, Fate is the Hunter, was released in 2005, and we found in 2017 her Ella Fitzgerald-inspired album, Tongue-Tied, and is thrilled to have her on the show. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
How did you discover Ella Fitzgerald in your world of L.A. and rock and roll and all that?
So my father was born in 1931, and he lied to get into the military because he had come up through the Great Depression, dropped out of school at 6th grade to pick cotton for a bowl of beans as payment per day to just keep from starving. So he didn't have a major education. He had a lot of practical life experience. He was a tough cookie, and so he got into the military to serve in the Korean War at the age of 17, send money home to his family and keep a roof over everyone's head. And while he was in the military, they'd play all of this wartime music and all that 50s stuff, the doo-wop stuff. He was too poor to have records, but he was exposed to music through joining up, and he really held on to all of those memories and would purchase these things called Reader's Digest tapes. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Digest? So he ordered that, and these tapes would come in the mail, and I would get to preview them. I'd open them and plug them into the car from the age of about 7, and Ella came on, and Billie Holiday, and Duke Ellington, and
Louis Prima, Keely Smith, all of those.
So these are like mixtapes.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, Doris Day, the greatest hits of all of these periods were all on these tapes, and that was my exposure and early education in music. And I would sit there and sing along with it in the car, and I learned how to sing off of Billie, and I learned how to listen to a story through Ella, and I mean, just the mastery of those performers was so rich. I was so lucky to be exposed in that way to that stuff.
Since then, since those days riding around the car, you've had quite an eclectic touring history with Damien Rice, Matchbox 20, Goo Goo Dolls, and even Rick Astley.
Yeah, and Maroon 5, and I've shared the stage with Ed Sheeran, and
wow,
performed on the same nights as when Adele was just starting out, and all of, there's a bunch of stuff that isn't public just because it was like a happenstance moment where it wasn't planned. It just happened, and I just am so lucky to have come through this journey as an artist.
Well, we're lucky to have you. We want to play a song from this new album, Tongue-Tied. This song is called Bada Bing Bada Boom. Tell us about it.
Bada Bing Bada Boom. So the label, the A&R man said, "You've got this really cheeky way about you. How about you step into that kind of writing and take on this persona for this album where you are a bit of a vixen or a siren or this cheeky thing." And so I would write these narratives that were very kind of inviting, and there's a lot of sex on the album.
Yeah,
but it's
we
not
can say
raunchy.
sex on this show, yes.
Well, we like that. That's fun. Let's talk about it, and it doesn't have to be weird. So it's playful.
Here's Kate with Bada Bing Bada Boom.
I lie for you. I lie and cheat and steal and cry for you. And when I'm in your arms, I die for you. And so comes a little death. I'm blind for you. The only man that crossed my line is you. My house of cards has been designed for you. My dad
was great.
Thank you. I have some wonderful memories associated with some of that. The canned version originally had recorded smashing of plates, which may or may not have even been real. So I took it upon myself to pay out of pocket to go to Goodwill, bring plates to a studio, and record crashing them and smashing them in a driveway.
I could hear them breaking, yeah.
Yeah. It was supposed to be kind of like an Italian wedding dance without the wedding. And then at the end, the warbling that you hear, that man that's going, that is the trombonist in Preservation Jazz Hall Band, the original jazz band that Louis Armstrong himself, the father of jazz, started.
Right. From New Orleans.
Back in New Orleans. Yes. So he is a member of that band. It's had many iterations and about 200 members through the decades, but he is still in that band. He's a fantastic player. He's the guy with the white trombone. And he also sings. So he played trombone across that track and lent his beautiful vocals to just round it out.
But he had no plates to spare.
Nope. No.
And you also had that kind of old school tinny 78 sound in pieces of it.
Yes.
How do you do that?
That's studio
that was just
magic, George.
Yeah, Studio Magic by Phil Thornalley, the brilliant producer behind The Cure at one point. He ended up working with little old me, and it was wonderful.
Back in 2013, you performed a couple songs on The Bachelorette, and I was wondering what was that like? Because I know that most of those dating shows look really fake.
Right. Well, I had me sign a non-disclosure, so I know how I peeked behind the curtain.
I see.
I think it's safe to say that we all know that it isn't one take. I mean, who's going to come after me? There's a lot of alcohol that I think helps people along.
You weren't a contestant.
No, she was just singing to two of the contestants.
Oh, okay. Well,
it was the final Rose episode where she made her choice, and I was serenading the Bachelorette and her fella at the end when they were celebrating the fact that they were together. I was the songstress that swooned for them when they were dancing.
Oh, that's cool.
It was very romantic. I know you can look this up on YouTube somewhere. There's the track record of these couples, like how many of them actually stayed together after the show.
I wasn't going to go there, but
yeah.
Yes.
But still, it was a very beautiful sequence I wanted to tell you, Kate.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it was lovely. It was really kind of dreamy when I was there. And I do think there are at least one or two couples that have still made it from their commitments. I know that there was like the original Bachelorette, Trista, I think is her name, and she married a fireman. I think they're still in it for the long haul. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's great. I think it kind of broke down after the first couple of seasons of that. Mm-hmm. Because then it was a whole system, not just this idealistic situation. Anyway, tell us about Tongue-Tied.
Tongue-Tied was originally written about a young man that I met at my gym. And he was this interesting fellow because he was a cage fighter, and I didn't know how to be around him because he was so different than me. It was an opposite track kind of situation, and he became a muse. It wasn't really like we full-on dated or anything. But
a cage fighter became a muse?
Yeah, that's a first.
Okay.
Isn't that funny?
That's an interesting transition.
He was so tough and like street-oriented and come up through like his father was a gang member, he was a gang member, and he was like out of that lifestyle, trying to be on the straight and narrow, like he'd come out of jail. And I just didn't know how to talk to him, but the attraction was there. So it was kind of like, well, let's just let that be that. So long story short, I have a longtime friend named Brian Adams, Mr. Brian Adams. You know that guy, right?
Oh, the guy from Canada. The pop star, rock star, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And so he's also a well-established fashion photographer. He shot everyone from Kate
I thought
Moss.
you were going to say he's a well-established cage fighter.
Oh, no.
Okay.
So,
well, I did not know he was a fashion photographer. Wow.
Oh, yeah. He does campaigns all the time. He's brilliant. Releases books of photography. So he had come to me through a friend and said he would donate an image for a self-release that I did that was championed by the BBC that got me signed to BMG in London. And so he lives in London, and he goes, hey, you're on my turf. I will volunteer, not for free because you're signed now, but I'll shoot your album cover. So the cover of Tongue-Tied, the album, was shot by Bryan Adams, and it was his idea for me to tie up my tongue in this candy rope, but the candy kept splitting because it was sugar, and so that's actually plastic on the cover, but that's like, movie magic for you, breaking down the...
Wow.
Studio magic, movie magic. Here's Kate with Tongue-Tied.
My boy is mad hot. One touch, I'm shell-shocked. Makes my hot fox trot non-stop. Could have been a one-night stand, oh man. Could have been a passing thing. Just a little boom, boom, bang. But we keep going again and going again. Oh, this healing won't stop. He makes me jackpot. Our eyes are bloodshot, dumbstruck. Think we got a perfect 10, oh man. And every bit of luck we can. Cause I got my ace in hand. Can we go around again, around again? This must be love. Cause every night our words are tongue-tied up. Pillow talk just sounds like double dutch. Like we drank too much. Yeah, one sweet touch. Whoa. Words come out like I scoop that ice cream. He licks the plate clean. No time, just more please. Strip tease, one another helping hand, oh man. Polish every room we can. Yeah, we gotta do the damn thing. Keep our mama coming again and coming again. This must be love. Cause every night our words are tongue-tied up. Pillow talk just sounds like double dutch. Like we drank too much. Yeah, one sweet touch. Oh, there's no arithmetic. My body's longing, but my language is mixed. We can't help but talking gibberish. Just can't handle this. Cause once we kiss, whoa, words come out like
George, that reminds me of the time I met Mick Jagger.
Really?
I was tongue-tied.
Now, who is that in the background that sounds like Louis Armstrong doing the scat?
It's an artist that's still performing these days. I don't know his name. He resided in England somewhere, and he was sampled for a Home Depot commercial that the same producer that did that commercial was paired with me because he did this kind of sound that you're hearing consistent between the two. And he's like, I think you should rewrite around what we've done as a music bed. And it already has the recognizable quality. In the UK, it was very established just in the placement arena.
Yeah.
And so he felt it would be a strong suit to have that kind of ear candy that people recognize to then lend itself to someone listening in on the rest of the track. And it worked. It became a single of the week and a record of the week, an album of the week. Like, it was all over the BBC in the top playlist for BBC Radio 2 and had tons of exposure and ended up getting more commercials off of that. So that was really exciting.
So did Home Depot send you a gift card or anything for
I wish.
borrowing their band?
It's like a distant cousin of like Rite Aid. They're called Boots.
Oh, yeah.
Boots, sure.
Yeah, Boots.
Yeah.
Oh.
Boots and
okay.
Tesco and
Right. I've been to
those
England.
chains.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so Boots ended up using it for a campaign.
Now, are you still living in London?
No, I live in Nashville.
In Nashville, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one good music center for another. Yeah.
That's right. I've always been in music cities. I've got to have access to that community. You know, I have to be able to plug in somehow, whether I'm just attending, because I'm not so much a country artist, but I can get out and see music that I appreciate. And it's not just country here. You can find anything. And it looks like I may be heading back to LA quite a bit to make a new album in the coming year. It's starting in January. I'm being courted by a label. We haven't officially signed, so I can't release too many details about it, but I hope it all comes together because it would be absolutely delicious. They make such strong music, and it would be a dream come true to work with that producer and their studios. The studio they have used to be owned by Sheila E. from Prince's band, and so there's just a lot of history there, and they're doing well in the vinyl game, which means a whole lot to me because there's nothing like listening to a vinyl recording. It's so so tactile.
To the point where you're simulating it on some of your records.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's how much of a fan I am.
To be technically correct, that was more of a shellac sound, but we know what you mean.
Well, if I was at your recording label, I'd send a few cage fighters your way if I wanted to pull you in.
Well, I do love an athlete.
Kate, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. This was wonderful. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by modernist realtor Angela Roll.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 12,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Rogue archivist Carrie Cesarino researches guests from her secret pre-marriage condo.
Oops.
Oh, not so secret now, sorry. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a non-profit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another extra, read all about it edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.